one thing.
That,
I was wondering if you should get the recording out earlier in the week,
sure,
because you
Yeah.
sent it yesterday.
all right. All right,
I mean, I don't know, that makes sense.
Project manager.
I can do that.
I mean, I'm like,
I can do
earlier is
it.
better.
I was here last week.
General.
Yeah,
I was here last week, so it didn't matter, but for me.
No problem.
Time value of money.
Yeah. Time value money, you're not paying me enough.
I heard that thought in your head.
Yeah. So let us,
Oh, I think we are.
we are on second book of Samuel,
6-5.
chapter 8,
The page.
okay?
Okay.
658.
659.
I like 8 better.
Well, it's cheating.
Right, it is cheating, you should be able to navigate yourself. Okay. They didn't have page number, our ancestors didn't have page numbers.
They didn't have books.
What that,
They didn't have books.
they also didn't have books.
Memorize.
You know what I did? I memorized it.
Yeah.
Right?
Whole thing? Come
The whole
on.
thing, yeah. The, in ancient times, you know, Jews had, universal literacy for boys, right? Okay, which, and what you would do as a boy is there would be a few, you know, before the printing press, there might be a book with the Torah in it, or a scroll, right? And the boys would circle around it and you would memorize it. And by the time you were, I don't know, 10, the smartest boys would have the whole Torah memorized, and you were
This whole thing?
not the whole Bible necessarily, but the whole Torah, the first 5 books, right? And you would move on to the Mishnah and you would memorize the Mishnah and you,
Oh my God.
yeah. The smartest boys would like have it all. And those were the smartest kids were the ones that would go to, you know, Vilna and go to the yeshiva, right? It wasn't everybody. Everybody went to Cheder, which was elementary school, right? But you would learn to read and you would memorize.
They still
Yeah, they
do
still
it.
do, yeah, they still remember.
Yeah, so,
That's why they can't serve in the army.
oh, right.
What's the invention of books?
Yeah, well, and the invention of printing is what made it so you got books in your house, so people stop memorizing, but you probably all memorized poems in school and stuff, right? You know, memorize the Gettysburg Address, things like that, you know, so memorizing was a big part of education. So. So you would just know in the book where it was. So chapter 8. Now, remember, where were we last week? David and Michal, the sad story of Michal and David. Michal was childless because David, you know, shut her out. Okay. So now we're gonna learn, you know, this chapter is just gonna kind of set the scene some more. So someone like to pick up in chapter 8.
I'll read. And after this, it came to pass that David smote the Philistines and subdued them, and David took Metheg Emma out of the hand of the Philistines, and he smote Moab and measured them with the line, casting them down to the ground, even with 2 lines measured, he to put to death, and with 1 full line to keep alive. And so the Moabs became David's servants and brought gifts.
Okay, so and brought gifts. So it's well, what's it saying? It's not gifts. It's taxes, right? They became the vassals, right? You know, the more modern translation has, right? So how did you would conquer other people, or you would subdue the other people, and then their king would have to pay you, right? And then and their king would get the money by taxing his people, right? It was
Let's stop.
what's that? Oh, someone's online but not muted. So how the system would work is you would have people that paid tribute to you, and that's how the empires work. The big empires would work too, right? The Roman emperor would conquer another people, maybe let them keep their king, but then the king, you know, they would take taxes from them, right? Then if that king really made them mad, then they would depose the king and put a Roman governor there instead, right? But that's what's happening here.
The sacrifice to God is tribute to God, taxes to God.
The sacrifice to God, right? Exactly. So God is our king, and so we pay tribute to God. right? And the other like in the feudal system too in Europe, kind of, it's not the feudal system exactly, but in the feudal system in Europe, that, you would have a king, and then you would have different lords all around, and the lords owed their allegiance to the king who protected them. The lords protected the people in their area, right? It's a protection racket, right? Like in the mafia. What's that?
Make you an offer you can't refuse.
Yes, yeah. Or I'll defeat your people, right? Okay. Keep going.
David smote also Hadadezer, the son of Rahab, king of Zobah, as he went to recover his dominion at the river Euphrates. And David took from him 1,700.
Sorry, where's the Euphrates?
Iraq.
Well, it starts in like Turkey and goes through Syria and goes down through Iraq, but it's way east, right? Are we to believe that David stretched all the way to the east? I mean, the book makes it seem like that, or maybe at least it's influenced it, right? But I'm not sure. Okay.
And David took from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. And David hugged all the chariot horses, but reserved for them 100 chariots. And when the Syrians of Damascus came to
Syrians is not the right word. The Syria is like a Greek, like came from Greek. It's the Arameans, right?
okay,
Sorry.
Came to Succor Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David slew of the Syrians 22,000 men. Then David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought gifts. And the Lord helped David whithersoever he went. And David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Betah and from Berothai, cities of Hadadezer, King David took exceeding much brass. When Toi, king of Hamarah, heard that David had smitten all the host of Hadadezer, then Toi sent Joram, his son, unto King David to salute him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and smitten him. For Hadadezer had wars with Toi, and Joram brought with him vessels of silver and vessels of gold and vessels of brass.
Okay, so what is this like setting the scene about? What's this chapter here for?
And David's conquering everywhere.
Conquering or at least subduing, so that then they, he's not killing everybody. He's subduing the other kings, and they're doing what? Paying him tribute, right? Yeah, so he's getting rich.
Well, he did it once and then all the
He
others.
did it
said
once,
that-
and yeah,
It works.
exactly.
It works.
Exactly, and then all the other people who have beefs with these people
Yeah.
are turning to David for protection.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, that's how it works.
Word of mouth, yeah.
You said setting the stage, it feels like the preamble of a movie you go to, which
Yeah.
is like the scroll, and here's what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
The stage for what's next.
Before Star Wars, and it gives you the whole story of the empire, right? Yeah. So, but this is telling us how now the kingdom of Israel is becoming powerful,
Mm.
right? Not just did David, get the kingship of Saul and unite the tribes who had a mini civil war. Now he's a power player in the region, right? That's what it's saying. Okay. Now, historically, were the kings of Israel really a power player? I don't know. Like, what did power? We're not talking about again. We're not talking about Egypt and the Assyrians or the Babylonians. Small time politics, but he's kind of a regional superpower, right? Or regional power. Okay. So, but all these people are bringing him gold and silver and chariots and things like that. So what does David do with them? Verse 11. Someone pick up at 11.
King David dedicated these to the Lord, along with the other silver and gold that he dedicated, taken from all the nations he had conquered, from Edom, Moab, and Ammon, from the Philistines and the Amalekites, and from the plunder of Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah.
Right. So what does it mean? Dedicates to God. What does that mean? What does it mean? Like,
But
What did David want to do a couple chapters ago?
Build a
Yeah,
temple.
Build a temple. All this stuff was gonna go into the temple, go for a temple, gold and silver and things like that, right? So it's kind of like in the Torah, how did the Israelites get all the gold and silver and find tapestries for the sanctuary?
The people.
But how did they, well, from the people, but how did the people get it? They were slaves. How did they get it?
Hmm.
The Torah has
I was
said.
thinking about that
They
before.
took it
Yeah,
from the
right.
Egyptians. The Egyptians gave it to them or the Egyptians paid them back pay, or they plundered it from the Egyptians, right?
Hmm.
And so I have to put in here, how did the temple in Jerusalem get so fancy? All the people of the region gave it to us, right?
It's interesting that earlier, a couple months ago, when we talked about things like armies would go in and just wipe everybody out everywhere they went.
Right.
Here, they're not wiping everybody out. They're just, I don't know if the word's enslaving them or they're making them.
Right.
Well, pay them taxes, like
it
you said,
doesn't say
you know, why
enslave.
wipe everybody out? We'll get them to get some of their fields and some of their
Exactly,
money and
exactly.
everything.
It-
So it's a little bit different angle
It's
now.
taxing them. It's,
He's taxing them, he's not, right, so this is, in Jewish law, this becomes different. So there's two kinds of war in Jewish law, we have the obligatory war and discretionary war. And then discretionary war has different subcategories. The obligatory war were the wars of Joshua, where God commanded to wipe out the Canaanites, those are done. Discretionary wars now are for different reasons, could be for self-defense. It could be for, you know, like what
Accumulating
David's
wealth.
doing here,
Yeah.
well, for the kingdom, influence, power, right, things like that. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay, all right.
Obligatory wars, you have to wipe out the Canaanites, right? That was the obligatory war, those are over,
and
right?
which one's this one?
Discretionary,
Which one's the one that's going on now?
discretionary war,
Discretionary.
right?
Just keep accumulating wealth and
Because,
taking
but
money.
it
Oh,
brings,
no,
but it
right
brings,
now.
it brings safety to the Israelites. These are, you know, these are people who could be doing the same stuff to us if we didn't do it to them,
Oh, he was
right?
talking about right now, like in
Oh,
today's
oh.
world.
Right, oh, right now.
Yeah,
Oh, well, right now it's different because there's no king of Israel. So in Jewish law, it's different because there's no king of Israel and there's no Sanhedrin, there's no court, right? But you could, if you give a parallel to help think of ethics, you could say it's a discretionary war because it's self-defense, right? But it's also within this category of discretionary war in Jewish law is deterrence too, right? So deterrence can be self-defense also, and that's what David's also doing, deterrence, right? Because if he wasn't like subduing the other people and making them pay tribute to him, the Philistines would be trying to do it to him, right? You see? And I mean, we think we're so we do it too. I mean, what does the US do all over the world? That's what they do. Well, I heard their military bases still in Japan and in Europe, and you know, that's what the US is doing. It's like we think it's more brutal because they're fighting by their hands and not by drones, but it's, you know, that's what nations do, right? And how it was codified in Jewish law, though, is what we did to the Canaanites is over, or what was commanded to do by the Canaanites, and now there's different rules of war.
it's interesting. Are the people in Israel, do you think it's the obligatory war?
Well, self-defense in Jewish law is obligatory,
Okay,
right? But it's not the laws of the Canaanite,
I see.
right? And you know, Israel's a democratic country. There's not a king with a Sanhedrin with a court of rabbis, right?
Right.
And so it's different, but you can use the way our ancestors thought about war to think about it too, right? And the ways our ancestors thought about war in the Bible and even in the rabbinics was influential in you know, thinkers in the Renaissance and in the you know, in the Enlightenment and things like that too, right? So yeah. So these wars are preemptive self-defense wars, right? I guess. Okay. But what does he do with the spoil? He dedicates it to God. Okay. Keep on.
Okay, David gained fame when he returned from defeating Edom in the Valley of Salt, 18,000 in all. He stationed garrisons in Edom. He stationed garrisons in all of Edom, and all the Edomites became vassals of David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went.
So Edom is, I think it's just east of the Jordan River, like in what's Jordan today, right?
David reigned over all Israel, and David executed true justice among all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was commander of the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Sariah was scribe. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was commander of the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were priests.
Right, so the Cherethites and Pelethites, I'm not sure who they were, maybe they were kind of David palace guard, right? But Sadok, this priest, who's the son of Ahimelech. Remember, Ahimelech was the priest that survived that town that King Saul's people killed all the priests, right? So David has his own priests loyal to him, right? And so, yeah, okay. So David is building up not just a kingdom with riches, not just a kingdom with secure borders, but also what? The naming all these people.
Civilian, civil
Civil
society.
service. He's centralizing a government, building a civil service, right?
You know what the difference between a recorder and a scribe is?
Not sure. I don't know. Mazkir means like the person who, I don't know, kind of knows stuff.
Okay.
That's what it means. I guess that's what it kind of means, a scribe. Yeah, the archivist, I'm not sure what it is. I mean, do we get a different word for it?
I'm looking for it. I don't see right now.
Verse 16.
Yeah, it says scribe as with reporter or ripper.
Yeah.
It is not entirely clear what his duties were, although they obviously went far beyond mere clerk. He may have been in control of royal archives. As proposed, he was also chief of protocol in the palace.
Yeah. So there you go. He's setting up a civil service, right? And an army, a standing army, right?
Is that what he means when it says he executed true justice among all the people?
Justice means that he set up a court system.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll see that later, how it's unclear, like it seems in the book of Deuteronomy that the kings have one function and the judges have another function, but in the book of Samuel, it seems like sometimes the king is a judge, and in the book of Kings, when Solomon acts as a judge too. So, the separation of powers is a little flimsy, that not based on totally what Deuteronomy says. But yeah, he sets up a court system, I think it is, right? But it's more he's centralizing power, because it was not just the tribal system of charismatic leaders and your own traditions within your tribe. He's centralizing things from Jerusalem and building, right? Like he has infrastructure projects, right?
Maybe the king acting like a supreme judge or the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it could be the Supreme
above the
Court. Yeah,
judges.
yeah, it could be. Yeah. Okay, now we're coming back to the house of Saul.
David inquired, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul with whom I can keep faith for the sake of Jonathan?"
Okay, stop. Now let's remember. Back to Jonathan. Who is Jonathan? Son of Saul,
His brother.
and David's friend, right? Loyal friend who saved his life, right? What did Jonathan have David swear? Do you remember?
They would not forget his, yeah.
That he wouldn't that he wouldn't forget Jonathan's descendants. Now, what's the problem?
They're Saul's descendants too.
They're also Saul's descendants, right? We have Michal, Saul's daughter, married to David. She's not going to have any descendants. Other Saul's descendants are already been killed by David's people that he had something to do with or didn't have anything to do with. We don't know. But he promised Jonathan. Now, why do you have to kill all the people of another dynastic house?
They might,
No chance people will go back to
Yeah,
be loyal to that.
right.
but
A
they might
challenge
want
to
to
you.
be a king because they said, well, my father or
Right.
my whoever was a king. And
Yeah,
I'm the last descendant. And
Yeah, yeah. Right. I mean, yes, it wasn't. I mean, in England, like 300 years ago, this happened, right? The House of Stuart versus that what's the house now called the House of Hanover, right? And it happens, right? Okay, but right, what could also happen if you bring in someone from the other house?
Sometimes it helps your alliance.
Sometimes it helps your alliance, right? He has Michal in his household, even though she's not gonna have any children, but, right? Okay, hold on 1 second, I have to get some.
That's why I thought he brought her back to begin with, actually.
Yeah.
So, he was, she was part of his.
Right, that's what we thought might happen,
Right.
but then he
Right.
decided not to have any kids with her, right?
Right.
Yeah, because, take vengeance on her. Okay, so, is there anybody still alive in the house of Saul related to Jonathan, through Jonathan? That's what he's asking. Yeah, okay. Someone else pick first.
There was a servant of the house of Saul named Ziba. They summoned him to David. "Are you Ziba?" the king asked him. "Yes, sir," he replied. The king continued, "Is there anyone at all left of the house of Saul with whom I can keep faith as pledged before God?" Ziba answered the king, "Yes, there is still a son of Jonathan whose feet are crippled." "Where is he?" the king asked. And Ziba said to the king, "He's in the house of Mahir, son of Ahmad, in Lo Debar."
So I have to correct this because it's my son's name, Amiel. Son of Amiel
Oh, this is,
in Lodabar. Right, verse 4.
King David had him brought from the house of Mahir, the son of Amiel, at Lo Debar. And when, I'm not gonna get this one,
Mephibosheth,
thank you.
that's his name.
Son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David. He flung him on his face and prostrated himself. David said, "Mephibosheth," and he answered, "At your service, sir."
Okay, so what do we learn about Mephibosheth? First, what does Mephibosheth mean? You want to read what I'll just like what it means?
No, that's not. I can't find it.
Okay, so. Mephibosheth, again, has to do with like shame, kind of like it's like a funny name, right? Okay, so but what do we learn about Mephibosheth first?
crippled.
He's not really a physical threat,
Yeah.
right? Okay, and he's also kind of in hiding, right? He doesn't have a household of his own. He's like living with other people, right? And so David brings him there. Okay.
David said to him, "Don't be afraid, for I will keep faith with you for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will give you back all the land of your grandfather Saul. Moreover, you shall always eat at my table." Mephibosheth had presented himself again and said, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog like me?" The king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I give to your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul. And to this entire family, you and your sons and your slaves shall farm the land for him and shall bring in its yield to provide food for your master's grandson to live on. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table."
So what's he saying here?
Yes, to be close to him, like
He needs to live in my house, that he could have the old estate.
Mm.
You, Ziba, that guy, you take care of the state and you bring in the riches to Mephibosheth, but he has to live here.
Keep your enemies closer.
Yeah.
Ziba had 15 sons and 20 slaves. Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do just as my lord the king has commanded him. Mephibosheth still shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons." Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household worked for Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate regularly at the king's table. He was lame in both feet.
All right. So it's kind of an aside, but like also about politics, right? Okay.
Well, wasn't it important that they reiterated that he was lame?
I think they mean that he wasn't going to be a physical threat to David, I think. Right, but remember, because what was one of the reasons people loved Saul as king?
Of course, he was a tough dude.
He was big and tall,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
yeah, good looking.
yeah, and good looking, right? So I think it's kind of a critique that doesn't make a good king, and yet it's hard. It's hard for the people of the time to trust you to overthrow another king when you can't do it yourself, right? I think that's what it's kind of saying.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so again, like, politics, like keeping people close is good in politics too. Like a lot of commentators are saying right now, what did Joe Biden do? What was the first thing he did after he stepped off the plane in Israel?
Hugged Netanyahu.
Hugged him.
Yeah.
Right? Netanyahu put his head on his shoulder.
He did.
Oh yeah, look at the pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Hugged him. They think the Americans are going to be able to like help the Israelis by showing them a lot of love, and then when they need to say this is what you have to do, it's much better.
I think the head on the shoulder, a little bit of the prostration, a little bit. I mean, or at least showing that I'm a big fan of hips, but
Yeah.
he just prostrate himself a little bit. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, our human nature has not changed, right? And you know, we have democratic politics, which are a little bit different, but it's you know, there's still power in play in the world, right? And so you know, why here I'll get very political. Why does Trump hate Netanyahu these days?
Oh, because he congratulated Biden for his win.
Yeah, right, exactly. It was an Israeli journalist who broke that story, you know, 2 years ago or whatever. But yeah, but Netanyahu knew that, you know, even though he was, you know, great friends with Trump, he knew that he now had to be on the side of the Americans. Yeah.
To me, we make this big distinction between democracy and not democracy. I guess I don't see it that way.
No,
I think the kings
right.
do also serve at the pleasure of the people to a
Sometimes.
certain extent.
To a certain extent, for
Yeah.
sure, yeah. I mean, David has the people behind him, and he knew he couldn't be the king of all of Israel until he had all the people.
We're learning it from this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like it's democratic.
There's a universal like rule for rulers, right? Even dictators, you have to build networks because otherwise you'll be overthrown.
Yeah,
So
Right.
there's way more similarity than you think across the system.
Yeah.
for sure. It's just that I would argue democracy is much more, has become more better for people because you know, because of all the checks and balances, you know, then you can't take power, all the power, and then you can lose power in a couple of years unless you're delivering for the people,
Well,
right? So like someone like Putin has to enrich the strong people of Russia, has to give a little bit to the people. And so what has he done since the 90s? The people now have fancy TVs and can eat good food and things like that. But he tells them stay out of politics. And if you get involved in politics, you know, I could kill you. And people know that, but they're okay because, you know, it's not as chaotic as it was in the 90s, right? That's his gamble. It may fail soon, right? And so it's like, yeah, you are accountable to people in some way, but you have to figure out the way to get the people on your side. Right, and then once you do that, then the system kind of runs, right? That's
what Orban did.
Yeah, and Orban too, right? People love him. Most of the people love him. Yeah, and the majority of people until 2 weeks ago, not the vast majority of people, but enough of the people love Netanyahu until 2 weeks ago, right?
Right.
And so power, like what do we learn about power is you can lose power very easily.
Transient.
Yeah, power transient. I think democratic systems set up a way to make power transient and not violent, right?
except you don't have the best people necessarily leading your country, which is.
Right, but you don't have the best people necessarily in the country with a dictatorship or right.
Or democracy.
Dictatorships are not as rich as democracies. Dictatorships are not as, like Putin doesn't have the best generals these days either, right? And so it's I think in American system we don't have the best people anymore because it's become a celebrity culture and not a meritocratic culture to be a politician, right?
And the whole point of the republic was against democracy.
I would argue that. So the Republic, no, but we're not. This is a class about politics, and a republic just means it doesn't have a monarchy.
No, I mean Plato's republic.
Plato's republic.
Yeah, so it's
Right, but the American Republic was
the whole thing.
the American Republic was a democratic republic. A republic just means that there's no inherited monarchy. That's what the word republic means. Democratic is the system of how you choose the leaders, right? Okay. All right. Chapter 10.
Yeah, someone else.
Here, sometime afterwards, the king of Ammon died, and his son Hanan Hanun succeeded him as king. David said, I will keep faith with Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father kept faith with me. He sent his courtiers with a message of condolence to him over his father. But when David's courtiers came to the land of Ammon, the Ammonite official said to their lord Hanun, do you think David is really honoring your father just because he sent you men with condolences? Why, David has sent his courtiers to you to explore and spy out the city and to overthrow it.
Here we have politics again. When monarch dies and the son takes over, right? David is sending people to say, hey, we still have we're still good with each other, right? But his people are saying what?
Maybe not.
Don't trust it,
Yeah.
right? Don't trust that, right? And so when what happened, like when the Austrian emperor died and the king of Prussia, right? Like, I'm just throwing this around. It's the same thing. Like, oh, is this time now to we could have all these German people here now in our kingdom, right?
So Hanun seized David's courtiers, clipped off one side of their beards, and cut away half of their garments at the buttocks. And sent them off.
What does that mean?
Humiliating.
Just embarrassing. Yeah.
Well, could have been worse.
Yeah.
When David was told of it, he dispatched men to meet them, but the men were greatly embarrassed. And the king gave orders, stop in Jericho until your beards grow back, and then you can return.
Sew up your pants.
But that's because he doesn't want the rest of the people to see that his quarters are embarrassed. I
Right,
guess.
or
it's-
he's gonna send them back to Ammon. Like, you think that embarrasses us, we're back, we're not coming back groveling, we're coming back as in full dignity.
All there uses the term that they're provocatively violating their diplomatic privilege.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is internal embarrassment
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah.
That you don't want these people to come back, because then your people,
We'll
David's
see
people
that.
will think that
Yeah.
he's weak
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
of what happened to his diplomat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The Ammonites realized that they had incurred the wrath of David. The Ammonites sent agents and hired Arameans of Beth-rehob and Arameans of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Makkah with 1,000 men and 12,000 men from Tob. On learning this, David sent out Joab and the entire army, including the professional fighters.
Okay, so,
Professional fighters.
yeah, so Dave, right, his standing army versus the drafted people, I guess, right? But what did the Ammonites do? Not only they embarrassed David's men, what they do?
Started getting everybody together.
Right, all the other little kingdoms, right? Like, let's try to throw off the Israelite domination, right?
Ammonites marched out and took up their battle position at the entrance of the gate, while the Arameans of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Makkah took their stand separately in the open. Joab saw that there was a battle line against him both front and rear, so he made a selection from all the picked men of Israel and arrayed them against the Arameans, and the rest of the troops he put under the command of his brother Abishai, and arraying them against the Ammonites. Joab said, if the Arameans prove too strong for me, you come to my aid. If the Ammonites prove too strong for you, I will come to your aid. Let us be strong and resolute for the sake of our people and for the land of God, of our God, and the Lord will do what he deems right.
Right, so Chazak, v'nit chazek, or Chazak, v'nit chazak, same, but that's what you say after you read a book of the Torah, right? Okay.
Joab and the troops with him marched into battle against the Arameans who fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Arameans had fled, they fled before Abishai and withdrew into the city. So Joab broke off the attack against the Ammonites and went to Jerusalem. When the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped their forces. Hadadezer sent for and brought out the Arameans from across the Euphrates, and they came to Helam, led by Shobach, Hadadezer's army commander. David was informed of it. He assembled all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and came to Helam. The Arameans drew up their forces against David and attacked him. But the Arameans were put to flight by Israel. David killed 700 Aramean charioteers and 40,000 horsemen. Wow. He also struck down Shobach, Hadadezer's army commander, who died there. And when all the vassal kings of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they submitted to Israel and became their vassals. And the Arameans were afraid to help the Aramnites anymore.
There you go.
No, it didn't work.
It didn't work, right? Okay.
But before this, I mean, David had taken, some of these tribes, these groups had become part of David. And he meted out justice, so
Yeah.
why would they all join?
Well, no, those were the ones that he killed first.
Yeah.
Those were the examples. So
Yeah.
I guess the Ammonites went to,
Well-
the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, and you have the new king Hanun, right? His people are saying, you could take David, right? Sometimes when you have new hotshot kings, they think they can do a lot, right? And so,
Interesting to me how embarrassment kicks it off,
yeah, right.
so.
Well, but the embarrassment was
And even now,
but the embarrassment was the symbol that like we don't need you anymore. We don't need
Right.
David anymore.
but it kind of jettisons a situation where
Yeah.
other groups are like, okay, well, maybe it's time.
Yeah, maybe it's
Well, was it embarrassment that started it all, or was it fear? Because it sounds like they were afraid and then responded to that.
right. Well, I think what started it off was just sense of the new king in town, I can assert my power. That's what started it all off, or or at least it's people saying you should assert your power. And then it kind of spiraled from there, right? Other people are like, oh, well, okay, well, let's try this. We'll support you. And it led to disaster.
But wasn't he responding to
Who's he?
his I'm forgetting the names and I don't have the text in front of me, but they were saying that the soldiers were coming.
Oh, we lost you.
But
Leslie, you muted yourself.
Yep. No, I just was unmuting with the space bar. I had a technical issue. So the soldiers came to give condolences, right?
Yeah.
And who was it that
Hanun.
there was a group of people who said, hey, don't think that they're really here to give condolences. They're here to spy and to kind of undercut you. That's what I'm referencing. That seemed like that's what started the whole thing, no?
Right, so it started with kind of paranoia or
Paranoia and fear. That's where I was coming from.
But
or
it's
it started,
also-
yeah.
It's also the court behind the new king
Yeah.
jockeying for their own personal power.
Yeah, it could be that too.
And thinking that if they have a chance to win, then their new king is more powerful, but they're the advisor who gave that to the new
Yeah.
king.
Right.
So it just seems to me like it's kicked off by the death of the king and
Yep.
that spirals out to everything.
Yeah, for sure. The death, it was definitely kicked off by the death of the king. What were people's motivations? The courtier's motivations might have been power or paranoia or
following the
whatever. But I think one message is saying is that like dynasties are not so stable either, right? The Israelites want a king so that they can live with security and stability. But dynasties are not always so stable. Like what happens when the king dies? Well, you have the stability that you have the family there to choose from, but there's always violence involved, right? And the other people of the area are all say alliances are not always so stable either, right? Because as soon as people see a chance to change the balance of power, they might take it. So, right?
I think we have to look at embarrassment today also in terms of the world. Not that someone's gonna have their clothes cut off.
Yeah.
But if America is working towards something happening in the Ukraine and they don't achieve their objective. Or if they say, I'm drawing a line in the red line in the sand, and the other people say, okay, so what?
Yeah.
These are embarrassments that we have to take into account in
For
terms
sure.
of how America is seen
Yeah.
as a power.
Right, why did America stay in Vietnam for, you know, how many years was that, 10 years? And then why did they stay in Afghanistan for 20 years? Was it embarrassment might have had a lot to do with
You
it.
should
People
never
wanted it.
underestimate embarrassment,
Yeah.
especially amongst young men.
Yeah,
And to me, a part of what happened in Israel is a function of that humiliation,
Yeah.
embarrassment.
Yeah.
Very,
Here, I'll
very,
say-
very,
I'll
very
say-
strong
I'll say-
motivator.
yeah.
I think.
I'll say my anti-BB thing right now. I think the justice or the defense minister, had a bunch of top generals and the head of the Shabak, the internal security, and Mossad said it was our fault. Like they said, we fell down on the job. BB has not said that.
That's right.
Good.
And he never
People's-
will, he probably never will.
He'll be voted out.
People
He'll be
say
voted
that.
out.
He will be.
What's that?
The people are saying it.
That it's Bibi's
right,
fault.
I mean, I mean, you could say what's gonna happen over the next couple of days is partially to rectify what amounts to, you could see as embarrassment in my opinion.
Mhm.
And that's why
Right,
BB's
yeah.
not a good leader. A good leader says,
Yeah.
it's on me.
Yeah,
He'll take the fall like Golda Meir did 50 years ago,
Mm.
at some point.
yeah. Right, yeah. I mean, in a parliamentary system, the leader can resign, right? And I mean, I guess the president can resign too. It's just it's
Just when you
slightly
say-
different
When
system.
we
right?
say Israel is a democracy, it's more like this than not.
I think all political systems are more like this than not. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, we've had, in America, we've had, how many presidents have been shot? More?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? We forget about that. And, you know, I mean, things are bad now, but in the late 60s, a lot of people were being assassinated, or, you know, too many people were assassinated and, you know, we can be more hopeful about politics, but, you know, I think political lessons from ancient texts also speak to what's going on today. Right? Okay, good. Slow now.
I'll just say
It
one
seems,
thing, Because your sermon last night.
oh man, I don't even remember.
So you go through the no hide laws.
Yeah.
You talk about blasphemy,
Yeah.
and it's so easy to become nihilistic.
Yeah.
And because I tend to nihilism, I totally do, you know, but I thought that was interesting when you said, when you look at some of these things, it's easy to become nihilistic,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
it's really a challenge not to be, and I felt that you kind of touched on that in your
Thank you,
sermon
thank you.
last night, yeah.
Thank you. So I'll say this, I believe in politics, meaning that humans live in community. We are communal animals. And to live in community, you need to organize ways so that you can live in community, right? That's politics. And how do we organize ourselves so that there's justice, so that, you know, there's so that, you know, there's freedom and equity and all the great virtues that we have, that we can think of, right? Communal virtues, that's what politics is about. And so, you know, this book is trying to figure out like how to do that for the Israelites, right? And so it said in the last chapter we just read that David established justice, right? You know, like what does the preamble to the Constitution say? We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, right? Ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. What's the other one? Promote the general welfare. And is there one more? Trying to think of the schoolhouse rock song. Union. What?
In a pursuit of happiness.
Right, but that's an expression, but anyway, like this is what we come together in community to do, right? Because we're not just individuals fending for ourselves, right? And so what is the point of the monarchy is to keep the people safe, establish justice, it seems here, right? Also
Defense.
defense, that's keeping the people safe, right? Also, I mean, in the Israelite kingdom, it was also to give glory to God, right? That's where the temple came in, right? Okay, to recognize the true king.
Rabbi, today though, in the United States, I think communities feel they are in chaos.
Yeah, right,
And how is this gonna end?
right. Well, you need to be able to talk to each other, right?
Well, this is chaos.
Right, the world's in chaos, but you have to be able to live in community. You have, I mean, America is an experiment of creating communities out of people who are not tied ethnically, right? You know, as we call it, like today we call it a multiracial democracy, right? So that's kind of an experiment of the last 250 years. Now, most of the people were kind of we created a new ethnicity of white versus black, right?
But we were law abiding.
Law abiding, right? So okay, well, law abiding. I would say 30 years ago, crime was much worse than it is today. Crime is upticked and it is bad, but like there's been worse crime periods in America, right? But like I would say trust, right? We need trust in each other, and trust comes from maybe trust comes from coming together for our similarities rather than our differences, than fighting about our differences, right? But I have to say, like the good old days in America, 20% of the population was kept out of them, right? Or 15 to 20% of the population was kept out of them. So the good old days of America, were not good for everybody, right? So like we can't get stuck in nostalgia either, right? But it goes back to Nyla. I think politics have to be about hope, that we can do this, right? We can create something that is better than it is today. And yet, for me, like that's why I don't believe in utopia either, right? So part of the issue with some forms of politics is like, here is the end point of politics, right? I don't believe there is an end point of politics. It's always going on into the future, right? Does that make sense? So like,
Yeah.
So for to be an extreme for the communists,
Right,
the end point of politics is the dictatorship of the proletariat. For the fascists, the end point of politics is the domination of the master race or whatever, right? And so some people in American politics today are flirting with both those extremes. I think a good liberal politics is always a few steps into the future.
Margaret King said it best.
Yeah.
With the arc of justice.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of there's an asymptote. There's always an asymptote.
Yeah.
We're going to you could hope that the arc progresses.
Mhm.
It doesn't always.
Right.
It could be a steady.
That's it. The steady march into the
and you're going to be. It's going to be pulled back, and you.
Right, and so when I say liberal, I don't mean like the Democratic Party. Liberal meaning like believing in individual rights, believing in rationality and views of the Enlightenment and things like that. But it also it's not sexy, right? There's no one answer at the end, right, of liberal politics, I think, right?
It doesn't speak to people's lizard brain.
Right.
And
So the far right speaks of making America great again, right? Like we were ever like things are much greater than they were 50 years ago in many ways, right? Do you really want to live like do you or 100 years ago or whatever, right? Would you rather I'd rather live it now than in the past, just because for many reasons, right? And for the far left, it's it's also a messianic vision of the end of history, right? And so I think politics is messy, and in that messiness you need to find hope, right? That's enough of a sermon, right? And so let's go back to David. What is he trying to do for the people of Israel, right? I don't know. Or is it only about him?
It's not
I got a few
either
more.
or, it's both.
Yeah. let's, shall we keep going for a few minutes? Because here comes now David's personal life,
Oh, good.
okay? So, someone want?
Are we 11?
Yeah, definitely.
11, at the turn of the year, the season when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. And they devastated Haman and besieged Rabbah. David remained in Jerusalem.
All right, so there's the time of the year when wars happen, right? I mean, we talk about this in Ukraine, too, like, the winter, it's too muddy,
Yeah.
right? And the time, and so it's now the season of battles, but what's David doing?
Chilling at the house.
Chilling in the house. Right? Is it because he's too powerful to go to battle himself? Because he's too opulent, too rich? Is it because he's getting old? What's the reason? I don't know. But anyways, he's not with the men.
Late one afternoon, David rose from his couch and strolled onto the roof of his royal palace, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. The king sent someone to make inquiries about the woman. He reported she is Bathsheba, daughter of, oh my God, Eliam, and wife of Uriah, the Hittite. Yeah. David sent messengers to fetch her. She came to him and he laid with her. She had just purified herself after her period and went back home. The woman conceived and she sent word to David, I am pregnant.
Got it, stop. We'll stop and we'll pick up the story next time, but.
That's just starting to get good.
I know. You've heard this story.
Yeah.
You've heard this story.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
Okay,
the
so. What's wrong with, what's one critique of kingship?
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, he thinks he can do it.
It's good to be king, yeah.
Right, but what's the problem here?
He covered another man's wife. And
Yeah, right. The king in Israelite society is subject to the law also. And what's a huge law in the Torah? In fact, a law that you get the death penalty for? Adultery. Yeah, right, yeah. Okay, and so when you have powerful people with time on their hands, is saying, what, bad things can happen too, right? Even David, who seems, we've talked about how David is very complicated, but he doesn't steal, right? And adultery in the ancient world is stealing, right? Okay. So, we'll stop there, and it gets worse.
About it for a week.
It gets worse. It gets worse.
It's worth.
Yeah. So, Bathsheba, but her name Bathsheba in Hebrew, it means the daughter of an oath. That's what Sheba means. Right? Okay. Let us. Okay.
No, we need this one. Oh, yeah.
Just saying, I'm pulling up beer cat zone. So let's see. Right here should be. Here we go. Let us. We gave thanks before we ate, so let's give thanks after we eat. Right? Yeah, I'll have the beer cat Amazon. It's the one with staples. All right. Shi amalo b'shuv Adonai et shivat Zion hayinu kechoni az yimales kodinu ushonenu brina ad yom Adonai Igdil Adonai la'asoti melech Igdil Adonai la'asoti manu Hayinu semechim Shuv Adonai et shivitenu kafikim ba'negev Hazorim bedima Berina Yitzoru. Haloch Yelechu Bacho. No se meshech hazara, bo verina, no se alumotad. Chaverim v'chaverot nevarech, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'atav yad olam, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach me'atav yad olam, Yershut ha'chevran nevarech Eloheinu shalchanu mishalom, Baruch Eloheinu shalchanu mishalom, u'tuvo chayinu, Baruch Eloheinu shalchanu mishalom, u'tuvo chayinu, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. Now we're on the first blessing, in the bottom of 706. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Hazan et haolam kulo b'tuvo, b'chen b'chesed u'rachamim. Unoten lechem l'chol basar, ki le'olam chaso, u'tuvo hagadol. Shamila Hasalanu Al Yasalanu Mazon Leolam Ba'or Shemo Hagadol Kilu Eldan Uparnes Lako Umetiv Lako Umechin Matzon Leocho Breotav Asher Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan et Hakol, feel God's source of food for all who live. We're on the part of the second blessing on page 608. Kakatu v'achata v'sabachta u'berachta et Adonai Elohecha ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach baruch atah Adonai ha'aretz v'al Amazon. Uvnei Yerushalayim, Yehakodesh b'meirav yameinu, Baruch atah Adonai, Bonei v'rachamav Yerushalayim, Amen. We praise you, Adonai, in compassion. You rebuild Jerusalem. You say, Amen. Harachaman, we invoke Aleinu le'olam va'ed. You can all say, Amen. Harachaman, Yitarach b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. Amen. Harachaman, Rishlach, Rachat, Rabah, Bayit Hazeh, V'al Shulchan Zeh, Shalchanu. Allah, merciful one, bless this house and this table from which we have eaten. That's why people bang on the table when you say that. Harachaman, Yishlach Lanu et Eliyahu Hanavi Zochor Latov, Yivasir Lanu B'sorot Tovot, Yeshuot V'nechemot. Harachaman, Hu Yanchilenu Yom Shefulo Shabbat, U'menucha L'chayei Ha'olamim. May we see a day when it's every day is Shabbat. That says toward the bottom. Oh, say Shalom Bimrama, Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Yaakov Yisrael V'yimeru. Amen. Adonai Oz Le'amo Yiten, Adonai Yivarech et Amo V'Shalom. May Adonai grant strength to our people. May Adonai bless our people with peace.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Thank you, Shalom.
You're welcome.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good.
Go ahead.